Hello and welcome to the Health Oddity Podcast, episode 243. Now, if you are listening on the day of release, which I know many of you do, is the 25th of April. So we are really moving towards kind of summer, really, at the moment, certainly in England, and where our guest is joining us from as well. It is a gorgeous day here, and I'll introduce you to our guest in a second. But first of all, I'll touch base with Mr. Peter Lance. How are you doing, Pete? You okay?
I'm doing outstandingly well. I was thinking the other day, I looked at the number of steps I did in March, and then I was thinking about last year when it just rained for 6 months, and we're getting glorious sunshine now. So it was a 1 in 20 year thing, apparently. And I was a bit worried this year that it would be a one every year thing, but it's not. So yeah, we are like just reviewing the month. With me and Sid did loads and loads of hugely long walks and stuff like that. And we're outside loads, and it looks like it's going to happen again this month as well. So yeah, so I'm doing great.
Excellent. Yeah, no, it's lovely here, and we are, like I say, we are coming up to our 5th anniversary of recording podcasts, and we are joined for the first time ever in nearly 5 years by a guest who is in Greece and is currently based in Greece and joining us from Greece. His name is Mr. David Amerland, and we have just been having a little chat before we've come on. And David's going to he's got a book out, a new book called Built to Last, which I was nearly late for the podcast actually, because I was reading the book, and then I suddenly looked and thought, oh my God, I've got to go get on the podcast. So it's called Built to Last, and it's how to get stronger, healthier, and happier at every stage of life. So we're in for a really good conversation today with David. Welcome, David. Thank you for joining us.
James, Peter, I'm really pleased to be here. I'm really excited about the conversation we're about to have.
Excellent. And like you say, we found you on social media. You found us. You said you listened to one of the recent podcasts, and so it's great that we get to have this conversation. It's kind of similar, Pete. The one that we had last week, Mike Tiktinsky, who was from Northern California. Just the way that you just kind of get connected to people all over the world through podcasts, through social media. Is really fantastic. So yeah, so David,
quickly, the funny thing on that as well is, like, if it's a book about like how to stay fit throughout every stage of life, David, you won't know this because the episode has actually in podcast land, it hasn't come out yet. It's the one before this episode, but Mike is he's 78 years old, right? And he started lifting weights when he was 60. And he's, and he's still going, and he's had a heart attack, and he's had cancer, and he's had a knee replacement and everything. And he's basically living like slightly different to what your book says, but it's the kind of ethos through it of just keep yourself active, and you keep going, So yeah.
Excellent.
We're adaptive machines. We need to keep that in mind.
So David, do you want to maybe just to tee this episode up, maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and your, how long you've been doing this kind of thing, what your journey's been, because the book is very wise. It's very, and it's very, what would the word be? Holistic. And it really takes a kind of a sensible, broad look at life and fitness and health and things. So yeah, maybe just tell us a bit about yourself and how you came to this way of thinking and writing the book.
Sure. Okay, where to start, right? Okay, right. A little bit about me. I've got a science education background. I'm a chemical engineer with a master's in quantum mechanics, specifically in laminar fluid dynamics, right? Which is a very fancy way of saying watching paint dry, which is pretty much what we did when we actually did the test. Seriously, I kid you not. But that's what it was, right? We were actually looking at the molecular structure of specific paint types. By changing the chemistry and making them smaller, you could actually get better bonding. So you get a better quality of paint without needing to have any kind of expertise when you apply it. So, and it's all a quantum mechanical effect. But let's get back to the...
We've learned something new. Who knew we were talking about that?
I know, I know, I know, I know. Right. Not many people get the reference of watching paint dry. If you get outside England, everybody says, oh, so what? You would say, yeah, I have to explain the joke. All right. So I've written books on search and social media and branding and online marketing and decision making and intentional living and now fitness, right? And they all appear to be very different. And there's a connective thread to all of them, which essentially reflects my own interest and my own journey in many ways. The connective thread is human behavior. Essentially, in all those different types of activity, in all those arenas, in all those different interfaces between us and the world, we are driven to do some things. We are not doing some of the things we should do. We do some of the things we shouldn't do. And that fascinates me because when we actually try to ask why, we come down to fundamentals, the things that make us human, the things that help us understand better how we operate. And my thesis always is that if we understand our own operating system better, then we can make better decisions, have a better life, become better human beings, connect with the world in a better way, actually do good just by being. And that's how I sort of came to write Build to Last. That's how I came to write pretty much every book I've written. I got into fitness when I was 13. I lived in Australia. I was an outsider. My parents moved states a lot. New school, no friends, always a strange guy who didn't understand the culture. So you get kind of lonely in your head, and then you get really angry, and it sort of builds up. And then you have very few choices, right? You can hurt yourself, you can hurt others, you can do bad things, or you can sort of compensate by using alcohol. Not an option in the 70s if you're young, no IDs or anything else. So I quite by accident, I found martial arts. So it's a community thing. I went, I liked it, I enrolled, and it changed me. And because I managed to basically channel all that nonsense you have in your head at that age into something more productive, it changed me on the inside first, then changed me on the outside. And that became my journey. My exercise has been a compensatory mechanism for me ever since. I've got a black belt in Wado-ryu karate, black belt in WTF Taekwondo, second degree black belt in ITF Taekwondo. I'm a certified Taekwondo instructor. I competed nationally in Britain and internationally between 1991 and 2000. And there's a high level competition. I used to train 16 hours a week. You had to, otherwise you dropped out of the team if you couldn't make the grade. And I still had a high power job at the time. So in a nutshell, that's been my journey, my trajectory. There's a lot of things we can sort of unpack there, but as we flow, some of this will come up.
Excellent. So, and how old are you now, David? Just so
I'm 60.
You're 60. Wow. Okay. Just to give some context, because you're obviously, we'll obviously be promoting your, your Instagram and everything later on, and encouraging people to follow you. But we see you obviously on Instagram and doing your workouts and what you're able to do from a functional perspective of actually what you can do, and also how you look as well. Would have never placed you at 60 years of age. So is this what is that the result of? Because I think you obviously talk about longevity in the book. So what's your view on what's your kind of broad view on longevity and what goes towards helping us live longer?
Okay, there's a lot to unpack here. First of all, let's start with the obvious, the look, right? Now, throughout our life, if we're living in a modern world, we've been conditioned to kind of link fitness with a particular look. You have to have the muscles, the six-pack, the lean body, that kind of thing. And this is about as wrong as it can possibly get. Sure, I mean, the way I look is a byproduct of the work I've done throughout the years at a very high level, pretty much like Olympic athletes look like Greek gods, right? But if we do the work they do, we're going to end up looking exactly like that. And the reason, the thing behind that is that in order for somebody to do that work, their motivation has to be right. And it's got nothing to do with willpower. It has to do with what drives you. I said already that in my case, it has been my go-to sort of a therapy kind of thing to decompress and get rid of stress and structure my life. And that's exactly what it has been for me. So I'm emotionally connected to exercise. And I kind of need it in a way because it provides guardrails for me in terms of my behavior. It helps me clear my head. It guides my thinking. And it's tied now to my identity because I've done it for so long. If we look at athletes, top-level athletes who go through incredible training, if we delve deep enough, we understand that they also come from very similar places. If we look at the world's fastest man, Usain Bolt, he's a person who's got scoliosis of the spine, one foot is shorter than the other. He got into fitness to try to compensate for that. He became the fastest man in the world. We look at a boxing icon like Mike Tyson. He came from Catskills, New York, brushes with the law throughout his life. He's on a knife edge whether he's going to go to prison or not. He finds boxing, he channels all that in there, becomes the youngest heavyweight boxer of the world ever. So, there's an emotionality that drives us. We need to remember that if the emotion isn't there, the decision making is going to be flawed. So the look is the result of the work, but the work is a result of that emotionality. If we go into the, within inverted commas, average person, if they don't have that emotional connection, if they have a different kind of look, which is different kind of connection, which is fine, they will not attain that look. But the look is kind of unimportant. It's a byproduct. What we want always is the ability to use our body, and everybody will have different reasons for exercising. We want to be able to feel capable. We want to be able to do the things we want. We want to be able to experience the world around us through our body without suffering. And we want to have the sense that we control our body, because if we don't, then we begin to lose a sense of control in our life. And if we lose control in our life, then we basically lost the ball completely. So when it comes to it, what we need about longevity, as you said, well, this is exactly what we want. We want to say, okay, I'm 60 now, I'm thinking if I'm 70, if I'm 80, inevitably, there'll be a slowing down because of time, because at a cellular level, we do age. But at the same time, I will not be trapped inside my body. I want to be able to wake up in the morning and go for a 5-mile hike. I want to get out in the morning and enjoy the air around me, go and surf in the sea, do those things which make me feel alive. So that's tied into who I am, the emotionality of that. And that's what drives me. And that's what should be driving us. Different reasons, but same emotional overtones. As we go through life, we need to connect who we are in the present with the person we want to be in the future. And the work has to start now.
It's great because we one of Pete's sayings that he says a lot. I don't think it was Pete saying originally, but it's what does it look like in 20 years? So whatever you're doing now, like you said, you're 60, but you're already projecting forwards to when you're 70, to when you're 80, and what you want to be able to do then. And just kind of extrapolating back from what you said, do you think then that when people fail to get this connection of themselves to their fitness or to that, because many people they're chasing the aesthetic first and they're not getting the deeper connection. They're kind of just thinking, well, I want to lose weight to look like this person, or I want to look a certain way. That's their main driver, rather than a deeper connection to what they're doing. Is from what you're saying? I guess that's correct.
Yeah, that's a very, very deep question. All of us start out the same way. We start out being the product of the environment around us. So why? Because we constantly receive external signals, which then determine our internal condition. So most of the time we react to the world. We are the good husband, the good neighbor, the good worker. Whatever label is applied from outside upon us and we accept it, it comes with a sort of expectations which we need to reflect back. It comes with some kind of understood kind of behavior which we try to apply. In all that, and this also comes to the fit person. Have you got big muscles? Have you got a six-pack? How can you possibly be fit? This is the kind of thing that comes from outside. On the inside, if we don't know who we are truly, then it's very difficult for us to actually move forward. I've been active in the world of business at a consultant level for a long time. I've sort of dealt with Fortune 500 companies and their VPs and the C-suite guys. And we always start from the same thing. Who are you? And then we get to the why. If you don't have those things worked out in that kind of environment, which is high pressure, and every decision you make can make or break your business, then whatever you do is going to be reactive. It's going to be short term. And then we're back to the drawing board in the next quarter. Same with fitness. If you just accept the world outside? Well, we know when the podcast comes out, we're going to be in April, we're heading towards May, everybody's thinking summer body. Oh, I've got to get to the gym 4-6 weeks, I've got to be ready. No, this is wrong. Okay, this is the outside world telling you who to be. Who do you want to be? And you need to ask yourself, the journey has to be inside. If we don't change on the inside, changing on the outside is temporary and it's hard and it doesn't stick. But if we change on the inside, then changing on the outside is a lot easier. And it starts with that. If you understand who you are, and then you understand what's important to you, and then you understand why it's important to you, then you begin to make that emotional connection, which allows you to prioritize. And the moment you prioritize, you know then what you're willing to do in order to get there. And that determines your why.
That's great. You said a couple of things just in there, but before that you mentioned guardrails and identity. And that identity thing is funny because people think they are who they are, and it's like, well, you can change your identity, can't you? You can say, well, I don't want to be like this is who I am, but I'm not happy because I might be overweight, or I get angry very quickly, or whatever. And that's like a product of the environment you've been in, isn't it?
Yes.
And then it's like, right, well, who do you want to be? And what does a person like that do? And how do they behave? And how do they treat themselves? And I was going to ask you about the Fortune 500 companies as well, because not necessarily them specifically, but because I know you said in the, not necessarily in this book, but you said you've got all these other books as well.
Yes.
And I was like, how do you approach people? Because like you say, if you make decisions, they're kind of short term and based on emotions at the moment, rather than, right, who are you to your core? Because people could have been running companies for years and say, look, it's successful.
Yes.
But they're like stressed all the time. And it's like, right, where's the flow? Where's the people who work for you, who want to be there, not because you pay them a lot and you force them to be there, sort of thing. Building that team, and then, who are you? So is that where you start with everything, basically? Is kind of like, right, figure yourself, which takes longer, because in my head as well, that gets lumped into just mindset, which doesn't really mean anything anymore, does it? It's like mindset. It's like, yeah, but what is that? And then it's like, who are you to your
I was going to
core?
say, okay, let's go on mindset. I'll give you an example here now.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to one of the perhaps most grueling things you can do in the world, it's to do the second week of SEAL training, which is called Hell Week. That's when they actually put you through such intense training tasks that they're designed to break you down, and they're designed to make you fail. 75% of respondents who go through that, applicants, drop out. And these are people who are already fit, right? They're already fit, they're already driven, they've been through the military. Now they're going to become Navy SEALs. So we get the second week and 75% will drop out. And the military in the US are very interested to understand why. Because when they look on paper, the people who drop out are almost identical to the 25% who make it. So about in 2020, Stanford University, the psychology lab there, carried out a test on 174 Navy SEALs. And they followed them through their sort of grueling test that they had to go through. They go through Hell Week. They gave them all the questionnaires, all the psycho profiles. They took some sort of measurements on how their brains work, etc. And then they came out with the results. And this is what they found, which is fascinating. The ones who dropped out, this is what they had in their head. This is how they felt. They felt, this is difficult. This is breaking me down. I really can't take this anymore. It's damaging me. And it's diminishing my capability as a person. And now the 25% who made it through, this is what they had in their head. This is difficult. It's breaking me down. I'm really at the edge of my ability. It's breaking everything I have, and it's making me stronger. So this is the classic glass half full, half empty, right? The people who see the glass as half empty, that's the mindset. Their brain then responds differently to the exact same situation on the ground. The glass is always 50%. But those who see it as half full, they can tap into a little bit more margin in their brain. And the way this happens, and we know this at a biomolecular level, if you feel stressed, if you feel that what you're doing is pushing you to the point where you're about to give up, inside you feel so much panic, so much toxicity from all the neurochemicals that build up, that the brain then feels under attack because it's the reaction to a perceived threat. It shuts down the higher analytical parts of the brain, which we use for clearer thinking because they're energetically expensive. And the brain is thinking, okay, you need all this energy in order to react. And then we just become reactive. And if you don't feel stressed, I mean, you still feel stressed, but not to that level, then you have access to those higher analytical parts of the brain. You're looking at the same facts on the ground, and you can connect the dots. You can see avenues of action which are not necessarily available to anybody else. So this is mindset. This is when we talk about mindset. It's that. It's how do you connect all the dots which you see, which are all the same. You know, if we count the dots, they're the same. But the connection lines are different because you have the margin necessary to take a deep breath back, deep breath, half a step back, and say, this is going to be a bigger picture, as opposed to, oh, this is what it is, and this is what I'm going to do, which is reactive, right?
There's a I can't, it was a YouTube video, and I can't remember if it was a TED talk or whatever. But there's a lady called Kelly McGonigal, I think she's called, and she talks about the stress response, and how that, you know, narrows your arteries and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And the excitement response, how physically it feels exactly the same, but internally your arteries open up and the blood flow and all that sort of stuff. So it's actually it feels the same, but the very fact that you think it's stress can stop you doing things. But if you look at it upon it as excitement, it can make you go further and do things. So I think it's a similar sort of thing. There's also the Carl Jung quote that I love, which I think ties into this, is unless you bring the subconscious to the conscious, it'll rule your life and you will call it fate. So that would be like, I'm no good at this. This is going to stop me. I can't carry on. Yeah. And that might even be subconsciously happening. Just like, stop. You need to stop. And you wonder why. Whereas if you've dealt with all of that and brought it to your consciousness, and you're like, well, I'm not going to listen to that. I'm just going to carry on, you know. Yeah. And then fate doesn't lead your life. You lead it for yourself. I think that's amazing.
That's right. Yeah. It's what you said. It's doing the work, you know, the invisible part of the work, where you ask yourself constantly, who am I and why am I like this? You need to understand that. And if you begin to understand, that's where real growth comes from. I mean, you mentioned before anger, right, as an emotion. We know from neuroscience that essentially that is a response to a situation where we feel victimized. So if I come, you know, if I say something which belittles you because I'm stupid and I think the only way to raise myself is to lower you, you feel victimized, and inside you, because we don't like being victims, the neurochemical reaction raises the level of toxicity in our organs, in our bloodstream, in our brain, which essentially, if it stays there like that, it's going to make us feel ill, and in the short term, makes us feel uncomfortable. So in order for us to reverse this now, the anger element kicks in. The neurochemistry changes now. You become from the victim into the aggressor. So you channel this into an action. You lower the internal pressure you feel. Good for your organs, bad for your behavior, right? But that's what it is. So that's where that anger comes from. When people are angry a lot these days because they feel disconnected from the world, they feel unseen, unheard, they feel that everything that's happening around them is leaving them behind. And because they don't then ask, who am I? They've been told who they are, and they accepted that initially. Then they have that anger inside them all the time. And we see it since the pandemic, we've seen it more and more, right? Because people got a little bit socially disconnected. We lost a little bit of the calibration we had in terms of socially accepted behavior. And this is coming out in lots of different ways, certainly in our behavior, definitely in our health outcomes these days, in the way our mental health is managed, the way we manage the stress we feel, the margin we have in order to respond to critical events is narrower than ever. So, you know, there's a good point to make here, that what we want to be has to start from us. We are the building block. We're the actuator of that. We have to say, okay, I'm going to be like this. I'm going to do the work inside myself, and it's really hard. It's really uncomfortable. What I see sometimes will not make me feel good, but it will help me understand better my own operating system. And that then is magic, because it allows us to guide our life a little bit better. You know, it's Carl Jung's thing again, right? We are basically creating our own fate that way.
So in terms of, can I just ask a question to relate this to your book, David? The first kind of section or of the book is called The Paradox of Fitness. And I know that you have I've seen you talk about what people believe fitness is, and you mentioned they see like an aesthetic. The first thing, if you think of someone fit, you see like an aesthetic, and you think, well, that's the way it looks when you're fit. But so how do people connect to what fitness is to them. I mean, on a practical level, if we're talking to people listening to the podcast, yeah, how do we kind of get our own unique view of fitness and make it and connect with that, which is the word you've used, connection. How do we
That's
connect to that with us? Yeah, I know it's different. I know these are not straightforward.
no, it's an
Yeah,
excellent question, and
yeah.
the answer to that is, in order for us to forge that emotional connection with our identity, we need to try and do the impossible. We need to try and visualize ourselves in the future, not the way we think we'll be, but the way we want to be. So if you say, like in my case, I'm 60, right? I know when I get to 70, I know from science there are going to be cellular changes in the way my cells operate at mitochondrial level. I know my bloodstream will have some neurochemical changes. I know my brain structure will undergo some change. I know all those things. At the same time, I know that we're adaptive machines. We react to the environment. And I want to get to 70 and do almost the same things I do now. If I'm going to lose something, it's going to be minimal, maybe 1 or 2%, maximum 5. Certainly, I'm not going to lose half of my ability. That's a no-go. So in order for me to structure that, then I'm thinking, okay, what should I be doing every day to make sure that when I get to 70, I'll be that? And I know that for a fact now from metabolic studies we've carried out that the moment we get to 70, we freeze kind of thing. Okay, between 70 and 90, there's a kind of degradation that happens to our bodies, but that degradation depends largely on the actions that we take or fail to take between 70 and 90. So if we get to 70 and we're in pretty good level of fitness, then we maintain that for another 20 years, no problem, provided we've done the work. And obviously, it's unlike you get to 70 and you stop, right? You still need to do things. But
I love that. That's made me think totally differently. Now I didn't know that. So yeah. So why not start now? And then when we all get to 70, like we'll be brilliant for 20 years. We've got 20 years for free.
But that's the emotional connection, right? So we need to have
Excellent.
that. So I've actually, when I stopped competing, because when you compete in any kind of competitive sport at a high level, this is what you need to do. You get there and you want to win. And for that, you're prepared to do everything that's physically possible for you in order for you to be ready on the day. Otherwise, there's no point, right? So there's no question about that. Everything is structured. You have your trainers and you have your teammates, you have your training routine, you have your goals, and all those things come together for you, and they're all external. I didn't sort of stop between 1991 and 2000. I trained really hard every day. There was not a single day in that 10-year period when I didn't wake up and my body didn't ache. And I sort of brushed it off, right? Because, you're pushing. So you accept all that. And then I stopped training because, I thought I was 35. The ego thing was getting to me, and I thought there's no point, let's focus on work. And then I had to rework my own motivation. Suddenly, there are no teammates, there are no coaches. I was fit already, so I thought I'm cruising in my fitness for a while. And then I thought, okay, this needs to change. And I had to do all that internal work at age 35 when I stopped competing. And I would think, okay, who am I really? Who do I want to be? How do I see myself as I'm growing older? And it was not easy, because you go through all those layers. You unpack your own ego, you unpack your own ideas, your own emotionality, and then you begin to attain a little bit of clarity. And when you get to the point where things are clearer, then you know what you have to do. You think, okay, I need to structure those things which I need to structure in order for me to not lose my physical edge. And we're not talking about competition level edge. We're talking about fitness which makes you feel good. Fitness that you can maintain without the possibility of injury, which will give you a setback. And when I was competing, we're all injured. At some point, the whole team is going up there with all sorts of injuries because, we're going for broke every time. So you have to do that work. You have to put it in place. And when an emotional connection is made, then again, it's that clear motivation that comes from the understanding. And motivation is important. I mean, people don't train sometimes, and they don't train because, let's face it, exercise is a stressor. I've been training all my life, and I have a home gym. It's literally 15 paces away from where I work. And when I finish and I know I have to go and train, and I understand all that, and I have made the emotional connection, at the back of my brain, there's this tiny little voice that says, oh, it's going to be so difficult. It's been a hard day already. We have to do these emails. You're stressed. Why don't you take a break today? Go tomorrow and do twice as hard, which is nonsense, right? We're not going to go twice as hard because then we won't be able to do anything else for a couple of days. So I know that voice in my head, and I did a little bit of research to see how that comes from it, because I kind of felt it all my life, even when I was training when I was younger. We are hardwired to avoid stressors. And we know this from anthropologists who have been embedded in the closest we can get to a Paleolithic community. You know, hunter-gatherer tribes in the Amazon, cut off from civilization, they know next to nothing about us. And anthropologists follow them for between 6 and 9 months, which is a feat in itself. And they track to see what they do. And these guys are fit, not big muscles because they're lean and they walk a lot, and it's an energetic cost to mass, which they don't have every day. But they're really active. They walk, they dig for their food, they have to dig for roots, they have to climb trees, they have to chop down trees. If they go somewhere in the forest, they have to chop down their own path. They have to do those things. And here's what they find. Okay, that's like a really active lifestyle, right? I mean, they're exercising. Yeah, but when they don't have to do those things, what are they doing? Nothing. They sit around. And we are inclined to do this. This is what we like doing, because in the past, our life was full of exercise. Although we didn't call it exercise, we called it life. And in between, in order for us to survive, the body has to recuperate. It can't expend energy for nothing. I mean, you don't see them in the Amazon after, you know, a 15-mile trek, they come back and do some stretching, right? Because they don't want to do that. Nobody's out there.
There's also, we've spoke about this with Paul McElroy before, haven't we? There's also the thing of like they sit around because their next meal, they've got to go and hunt it. And they need energy for that. And if they've done a marathon, just cause, they're not going to be able to do that.
So we have all these really hardwired responses to stressors, which make a lot of sense in that environment. Now we get to today, right? I'm sitting at my desk, I'm looking at a screen, I have a refrigerator, which is literally 10 paces away. It's got 10,000 calories in it. So, you know, it's easy for me to go and reach for something. It's easy for me not to do anything all day. And it still feels like work because, you know, I'm still burning calories, just not as many as if I did exercise. I'm still, you know, working out my brain and my body to some extent by sitting there, but I'm not giving it enough signals in order to adapt and evolve, which means that standing still is degradation, right? It's going to start dropping off incrementally, and you won't be able below our conscious level, and that takes us back and back and back, and then suddenly we can't, you know, go for a 5-minute walk because, you know, we get out of breath.
This is really interesting because we've talked about this briefly before, but not in this context or with this sort of background to it. Because I think a lot of people who maybe struggle with their connection to their health and fitness, so people who struggle with that, look at people who have a better connection to their health and fitness and just assume that they love exercising every single day. They never miss a session. They never want to miss a session. They're always motivated. They just find it easy. But I know that just prior to coming home and getting on the podcast today, I'd been at work sort of 6:30 till I think it was about 11. I finished with my client, and then I had scheduled to do some training before coming home and getting on the call. But my brain was doing the same thing that you said. It's like, well, if I get home a bit earlier, I can spend longer doing research and reading the book, and then that'll be better for the podcast. And it was just me trying to talk myself out of doing the hard thing, you know, like doing that stressor. So I think that, like you say, I think people probably look at you, David, and think, oh, well, you've done it all your life. It's easy for you. You love it, that you never have any negative, you know, your brain never tries to talk you out of it. But it's really great that you say, you do try. Your brain tries to give you excuses, doesn't it, to not do it
absolutely.
all the time. Yeah.
We need to take on board that essentially we are not thinking machines that feel. We are feeling machines that think, and our thoughts are always the layer we apply in order to justify our feelings. So we feel this reluctance to exercise. All the excuses are solid, right? Really logical. The smart thing here is always to understand our operating system. When we understand that this is understand what is happening, why it's happening, then we can strategize to make it easier for us to exercise. And in my particular case, I use two things. First thing is I make it easy for myself, no obstacles, right? I have a home gym. I can literally, you know, work out in my working clothes if I have to. I don't even have to change. I do change, but, you know, I don't have to. The other thing, and this comes from studies now, and I'll explain the background and the logic of that. We know that if we exercise for 10 minutes, then we're going to exercise for an hour. So I make a deal with myself. I'm saying, okay, I don't feel like exercising. I'm really tired. I'm really exhausted, really. I'm going to go and do something for 10 minutes on the clock. I'm going to come back. Worst case scenario, I will have done 10 minutes. And it never happens, right? And this is what we know now. We know that if we start exercising at approximately the 10-minute mark, our muscles secrete a particular type of hormone, which is a neurotransmitter, which then impacts positively on dopamine in the brain, activates the reward system, keeps us going. And the logic for that is that essentially, we go back to Stone Age again. You're running for your life. Tribes people are chasing you, other tribe people, tribes people, or a tiger, right? And what happens? If you run for 10 minutes, you get tired. And the moment we get perceptually tired, what do we want to do? We want to stop, in which case you get killed or eaten. So your body, your brain says, okay, you need to run for 10 minutes. Great. And you're getting tired because you're running fast. No problem. Okay, here's a neurotransmitter, a neural boost, basically, to make you feel good about what you're doing. So you can keep on doing it for as long as necessary. So I take advantage of that ancient machinery in our brains. So I go, okay, 10 minutes, that's the deal. And it seems sort of like boorish not to go for 10 minutes, right? The gym is right there, and 10 minutes, I can spare that, and then I can go straight to bed if I want to. I go there, exercise for 10 minutes, my mood has changed, my body's warmed up, the neurotransmitters are flowing, endorphins are flowing through our system. I end up exercising for an hour, maybe an hour and a half. So it happens every time.
That is incredible. We talk about that, Pete, didn't we? The fact that if you've got, say, 4 exercises to do, and like you say, well, I'm just going to go and do the first one. By the time you do the first one, or by the time you've done the first 2 sets, you're in it then, aren't you? You're doing it, you're moving, and the momentum kind of takes you through it as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because David said something there about being like, I'm exhausted, but I'll still go and work out. It depends. Like, I think most people are mentally exhausted, and mental exhaustion and physical exhaustion are different things, aren't they? You can still do something physical if you've been sitting looking at a screen all day.
Okay, let's talk about that.
Is that true? That's the way I think of it. If you've been,
if
you've been at work all day, staring at a computer screen or whatever, and you're like, right, I'm acting, but you can go out and do something, like even go for a walk or a run or whatever, something lower level. It changes your state, but you'll be able to tell me.
Okay, what everybody said is absolutely correct. But here's, and I'm glad you brought up fatigue, right? Sure, we can sit on a chair, look at the screen, deal with that. All sorts of complex situations, they can be critical for our job. Blood pressure goes through the roof. We face a lot of pressure inside our head, and we deal with it, and we finish, and we're exhausted, and we're drained, and we're empty. And now I say, okay, let's go and exercise. And you can't. Why? Because you're tired. You haven't been doing anything, you've been sitting down. But that's not true. The brain uses the same kind of fuel as the body. If you lift weights, you're using adenosine triphosphate, ATP for short. If you're dealing with a crisis in your head, you're using ATP because there's no other fuel for the brain cells. The amount of ATP available in the body has some kind of limit. It's inexhaustible. And what happens, although it's constantly replenished, in that process, adenosine in itself begins to build up, and that makes us feel tired. When we drink a cup of coffee and it rejuvenates us, essentially all that coffee does is it binds itself to the adenosine receptors so that they don't find a place to hook themselves to. So we still have adenosine in our body, but it's sort of free floating because coffee blocks it. And that's what gives us that boost of energy. So after a busy day at work, we are absolutely drained. Our muscles are not tired. You're 100% correct there. But the way we feel in terms of energy, when you have so much energy in the day, is not the same. And that's why sometimes you can have a really stressful day at work or at home. You go to the gym and your performance is not the same. Even though physically you haven't done anything. You just had an argument at home, or you had a really manic day at work. But we burned up through our supplies of ATP. If we move our body, however, and neurochemistry changes. And fatigue is a funny thing. It's not that we don't have as much adenosine in our system. We do, probably even more because we exercised. But part of our neurochemistry changes, and some of the strength we feel comes from neurochemical reactions. Strength has nothing, that's not true. Strength has something to do with muscles, but it's not exclusively part of the muscle, right? Strength is essentially a combination of how strong individual muscle fibers are, how the body connects to different other parts of the body to create a kinetic chain, how strong the signal is from the brain to the body through the central nervous system, and as a last layer, which is still very complex and we very poorly understand, the neurochemical reactions that happen, which can replenish some of the chemical energy we use. That's why if you get angry for something, suddenly you have a lot of muscular power, which you didn't have before. Right? You think, oh, well, I don't have the strength all the time, because you don't have the same neurochemical reaction flowing through you. So we have all those things. So if you move your body, essentially you're giving your brain a rest. It's working differently. When different parts of the brain work differently to what they were doing, they get replenished. The brain is a really complex machine. We are getting better at understanding it. We're actually making breakthroughs every single day, and we still probably understand between 1% and 2% of what we should. So we know next to nothing about it. But this is what we do know. And this comes from when I was researching the book on snipers, which then applied to business principles, what we can take away from them. Okay, if you're a sniper in a hot zone, you're operating at incredible pressure. You're looking through the scope with both eyes, not one, right? Their eyes are open. Usually it's either too hot or too cold. You're usually under fire. You're usually operating at extreme levels at the limit of your physical capability. And usually you're operating at the limit of your equipment, and you have to go past them. You have to synthesize all that, make life and death decisions, take a critical shot, knowing that every shot you take is overseen. You can actually go to jail for a wrong decision when you get back home. They're the only combatants who actually face that kind of pressure. Looking through that scope is energetically expensive for their eye and the brain. At some point, the neurochemicals which process the visual signals begin to become exhausted, and they get blurry vision. And they still have to fight. They can't say, oh, I'm tired, I gotta go home. And this is what they do. They take their eye off the scope momentarily. They touch the ground, feel the earth, look around, take a deep breath, smell things, and just take a deep breath on that. And that replenishes them. That's it. That's all it's required, because those activities essentially change the focus of the external signals from the outside world. So our internal state then changes. The way we process information changes. And momentarily, they stop operating at such a high level through the scope. And that's all they need in order to replenish the neurochemistry that they need in order to do that. So we can take a lesson from that.
I was about to say, I've told you, I haven't had to do it actually, but I've got builders on the house at the minute and stuff like that. We get, because of pollution like I live in a really old building, pollution in the 70s and 80s, it's got carbon on the walls. So they've been washing it off. And some of the water came back through my boiler into my house. So I didn't have any hot water yesterday. My electric and gas was off for another reason as well. And I could feel the stress building of this. I was like, I can't have a shower. I can't do this. I just took the dog for a walk and I came back feeling so much better. And by the time I got back, everything was working again. So all of that was that was out of my control. And if I'd have stayed here, I went out for 2 hours with the dog. If I'd have stayed here, I would have broken something.
Totally get you. This is a lesson for all of us. You know, the moment we tend to be in the moment, and the moment controls us, right? And then suddenly take half a step back. Take a deep breath, look around, gain some perspective. That's all that's required. And then suddenly you reset. We're all incredibly capable, way smarter than we think. We can always do more than we feel we can do. But we need to give ourselves the chance to get out of our own way, to stop feeling, oh, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, this thing isn't working, my equipment is not good enough, and I'm under pressure, nobody understands me. You know, all those negative things which are in our head. And again, there's an evolutionary biological reason for that, right? You know, if we take the sort of proverbial two guys who stepped out of the cave, the guy who said, hey, let's go over the mountain and see what's on the other side, and didn't hear the voice in his head that said, you know, you're going to be on your own, no tribe, no food, no water, maybe enemies along there, beasts, and etc. Okay, the person who didn't hear that probably never came back, didn't pass his genes on. The person who did and stay with the tribe did. So that negative voice is there to protect us. At the same time, in most cases, it keeps us back. We need to be able to contain it.
Well, especially in the world we live in, where, you know, arguably most people live in a world with very little threat.
Yes.
like immediate, like existential threat. I mean, there's threats around, you know, but you could get hit by a car or whatever, but still it's like,
Yes.
but your brain's still working at that level of any, because I learned this a while ago about it being just basically a threat detector. And anything that you, it doesn't even have to be a threat to someone else, but if you perceive it as one, then it stops you doing what you want to do.
Exactly.
I was going to talk about this. You mentioned about finishing competing.
Yes.
And that's what I was going to ask you ages ago. Because people might look at this and go, okay, I can do all these things and decide who I want to be, get my identity, do the things to become that person. And then say they do that and they get towards becoming that person, then they go, right, I've done it now. It doesn't end though, does it? This is the thing.
No.
So you said your example was when you finished competing. Yeah.
We're not a product set in stone. We're a process. We're an open system, right? Our internal states are in constant flow with the outside world. I mean, even as I'm sitting here, you know, I've had a busy day. I've got like a gazillion things to do. There's light on my face. I'm really sort of focusing so I can deliver value to you guys. So I'm doing all these things, right? And my internal state, if I don't control it, can go out of whack. I can become nervous, then I'll lose my train of thought. The whole thing can go to pieces. So I have to be able to maintain it and function in that way. And that's our life. Constantly, at every moment, we're going to have the external state of the world affecting our internal conditions. And then it's up to us. I mean, if we were cavemen, we're driven by the moment. We're in the hands of the gods, right? Whether we make it or not, it's fate. But we're not cavemen. As you said, we live in a world which we fashion to be mostly safe for us. And we now have the capacity to understand how we work and actually use our brain. This is the magic of it. If we understand our operating system, we can actually guide it. We can become better. We can say, okay, I've got all these things going on around me. They're impacting upon me. How then do I respond to those things? And those things will change at every part of our life. The 20-year-old us is going to have a different idea of who he is, what he wants, what's important, and where he's going. The 40-year-old one is going to be different again. And at 60, you're different again. It's that process. We are a constant process in flow. But what doesn't change is our ability to understand that self at every step of the way. That always stays the same. And when we understand the self that we are, then the goals that we set make sense to us, they're meaningful, and then we ascribe different value to them as compared to the effort required to get there. So if you tell me, hey, David, you know, I don't know, you can say, do you want to be the fastest man in the world? Oh, you know, that's a great idea. I'd love that, right? Explosive. I'm thinking good muscles. You know, there's a lot of fame that goes with that. And also, look at that. You're the fastest man in the world. But that's something intellectual. I don't feel that. I've never felt the need for that. So if I were to agree to do something, okay, I'll be able to sort of do it for a while. And I'll think, you know, I'm really busy. I haven't got time for this. Too old, you know, whatever the excuse I want to give to myself. But if I truly feel that something is of value, then because it's linked to who I am, then the weight which I'm placing on that is way higher than the effort required to get me there. Then I'm going to do it.
So with this, I had this thought earlier as well of like the actual process to get towards any of this is largely the same.
Yes.
Regardless of whoever you're talking to, someone will want to be one thing, someone will want to be something else, someone will want to be something else. There'll be a fitness element, there'll be the way you look element, there'll be a mindfulness element, stress, all of these things. But actually, the process to get there is to be consistent and do something physical, eat well, you know, do some sort of mindfulness practice, whatever it is. So why do we overcomplicate it, do you think?
Well, many reasons. I mean, in order for us to break it down, and there are 4 core elements to whatever we want to get to, and they're going to be the same for everybody. What are they? You need to have a physical element, some kind of exercise, in order to maintain the health of your body, and by association, your brain. You will need to have a fairly worked out nutrition in terms of what you're eating, so that it doesn't affect you negatively too much. And again, you don't have to be super prescriptive, you don't have to be super disciplined, but if you go out clubbing every night and then you finish up at a fast food joint, well, you know, you could do it when you're 20 and brush it off, and at 30 you can't, and at 40 you definitely can't. And then you need to have quality of sleep, right? And sleep is important. We know that muscles grow and recover only when you're asleep. And we know now that the brain itself, as we age, loses its ability to deal with sleep deprivation. Okay, when I was in my 20s, and even before that, in my early teens, I used to think, because I grew up in the 70s, we didn't know what sleep was about. We thought it's a waste of time, and I bought into that. I thought it is a waste of time. So I experimented with getting 5 nights of sleep a week. I thought, I'm going to need to gain some extra time. My body and brain soon disabused me of that notion, but I experimented, right? And I wasn't any worse for wear for doing it. Even though I was training and working after school, etc. If I was to lose 3 hours sleep on a working day today, the next day I'm like a vegetable. I need to have a caffeine IV with me everywhere to just drive it forward. Okay. So we know the capacity of the brain to absorb that kind of damage that comes from the increased toxicity levels diminishes with age at a cellular level. Similarly, we know the brain also recovers from concussions slower as it gets older. Okay, which is why it's a bad idea to have 45 or 50-year-old boxers, for instance, because they take the damage but they don't recover so quickly. So things are bad. So you need to have sleep. And the fourth thing which you need is crazy. It's social. You need a social life. And this is not being a party animal. It's actually having social connections that are meaningful to you, and you provide meaning back to them. Now, I've looked at blue zones. There are 5 blue zones in the world. They're called blue zones because the people there live longer than anywhere else in the world. And we've done a lot of analysis on these things. And they're difficult to correlate. They're in different parts of the world, different customs, different traditions, different diets, different levels of exercise. Sure, they have active lifestyles, and also they exercise a little bit on top of this, but they're different, and they're very, very difficult to actually say, okay, here's the formula. This is why they live longer. But there's one thing consistent across all blue zones, and that's a sense of belonging and a sense of community. And what that does, because they don't have high socioeconomic conditions, their lifestyle is not expensive. Some of them sort of, having what we'd call a subsistence kind of living, living off the land. But by having that social connection, we now know the brain recalibrates itself. It gains that perspective. It reduces stress and reduces inflammation, and chronic inflammation in the brain and the body essentially ages. They impair us. So they manage to live longer simply by doing that simple thing. So social is the other thing. So the formula is exercise, food, good sleep, and a good social life.
And that's to provide health for the brain and also health for the body and for longevity.
Yes.
Those things. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We know from because of the wars, the unfortunate wars we had in Afghanistan and Iraq, we had we had casualties coming back, and they were doing post-mortems on them. And they're peak fitness, right? They're like 20, 25-year-olds, super fit, and they have serious inflammation in their body. It doesn't impair them at that level, at that age. They can't even feel it. But if they hadn't done anything about it, they would have felt it at 35, 40, 45. So we know that as we age, by reducing inflammation, we're essentially helping our cells become younger, because we're taking the energetic load of living at the cellular level, we're taking the clock back.
So
I was going to say, the way I'm thinking about this more and more these days as well is, and you said something earlier, is of what you can control. And you can't control everything in your life. Nobody can.
No.
But you can bring more things under your control if you're more calm, if you're fitter, stronger, healthier, all of these things. And if you can keep that going until you're 70, and then you've got it till you're 90 by all accounts, which sounds great. I'm going with that. Because as we age, we give up control to things, don't we? I can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
I can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
And I said to Mike, it was Mike last week, wasn't it?
Yes.
He had all these medals on his wall. He had all these medals on his wall, right? And someone of not even 78 years of age, someone of 50 years of age might look at that and go, oh, what are those medals? I go, oh, 30 years ago, I was winning this, winning that. All of his started at your age now. The first medal he got was like after your age now. And then 20 years later, he's amassed them all on his wall. So he's kept all these things under his control. And I think that's great.
I'm glad you
and then
mentioned.
and then just quickly, the way it goes then is like the things that you can't control, like genuinely can't control. You're just like, well, okay, it's out of my control. That's fine, and you don't stress about it, or you wouldn't blow up about it. So, which again helps you to live longer because you're not stressed.
Yeah. I mean, you pretty much nailed it. I'm just going to sort of quantify it a little bit more scientifically.
Yeah, I'm not good at that. So
no. I mean, what you said is brilliant. Okay, there's no problem with that. But by looking at the science behind it, we understand it at a granular level a little bit better. Now, we mentioned the brain earlier, and the brain only has one line of code. What's a line of code to help us survive? That's it. That's all it's there for. And in order to do that, it has one prime directive, right? What's a prime directive? It's essentially a predictive machine. It tries to predict the next moment. Why? Because if it can predict the next moment, then it can foresee what's happening, it can guide the behavior, and that ensures our survival. So out of those two things the brain is designed to do, its prime thing, which is essentially its role to help us survive, and its prime directive to predict the next thing, we build everything else. We build trust, we bring societies, we have laws, we have social contracts. All that complexity comes down to that. And what does that achieve? You mentioned earlier that we managed to eradicate pretty much from the world the incidental violence, where somebody will kill you as you step out of your house because they like your shoes or they want to eat you. We don't do that anymore, right? Right. That's what we achieved. We achieved that ability to predict the next moment without complexity. That gives us a sense of control over our life. You can wake up in the morning and you pretty much, on a good day when you don't feel too stressed, feel that you're on top of the world. You know where you're going to go for a coffee. You know you're going to meet your mates. You know what you're going to do at work. You know how the work is going to go pretty much. You're going to come home and already you're planning dinner, TV, whatever it's going to be. Everything's under your control, right? That comes from that. And if we feel like this, what happens inside us? Because that's external things. But our internal states, when we feel that we have a sense of control of our life, are remarkable. We feel less stressed. We use up less energy. We have clearer thinking. We're more analytical, and we're happier in ourselves. So all these things come from that control, and everything's about that. Obviously, we can control truly, if we think about it, very, very little. But what we can control is our body. So if we do the things which we feel we can control, I don't let myself drop below a 40 push-up mark, for instance, if I'm going to do it in one go. If I drop to 35, that's a disaster for me personally, right? So I'm going to work to do that. Why? Because that stupid arbitrary mark for me allows me to sense that I control my body. And the moment I control my body, then the internal states in my mind don't get out of their calibration, they don't go over the edge, and that gives me margin. What you said about, the things I don't control, don't care about. Yeah, we do care about them, but we have the margin to say, okay, there's not a lot I can do about this, and this I'm going to deal with later, and something's completely out of my hands. But that cool analysis comes from that margin. If I'm operating every day to the very edge of my capability because I'm being pushed, my body isn't right, my brain isn't right, just surviving the day takes me to the very edge. You ask me to do a tiny thing, I'm going to blow up. It's too much. And you're going to say, what an unreasonable person he is, right? We've seen this more and more in the world because the pandemic pushed us to the edge for many of us. We're all operating, many of us, across the world, right? And I've seen people in different contexts operating to the very edge of their capability right now just to get by. So the tiniest thing breaks them. A tiny crisis, something which is completely out of their hands, and now they're focused on that, and they just overload. It's that. So
have you ever seen Falling Down? We talk about that a lot on here.
Yes. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yes.
It's not in
it. Prophetic, right?
Yeah. Just watch that film, and like everything you've just said there is in
it. Yeah.
I was going to say, because there's obviously not like, obviously you've mentioned the pandemic a couple of times in terms of COVID, but there is a kind of, I suppose, like, although we do live in a society now and a world that probably objectively by any measure is safer than it has ever been, and like you say, you're not under constant, you don't have to look over your shoulder all the time. I mean, I'm not in some places you will do, but we're still
yes.
But
like
I mean,
Sunderland.
But there is a kind of a pandemic of stress, I suppose, or there's certainly the word stress or the word anxiety is used a lot now that it wasn't used I don't remember 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Yes.
Um, so this stress, where do you think this kind of stress and anxiety that many people kind of feel? And like you said, that I love what you said. I can't remember. Let me see if I get it right. But you said that we're feeling beings
Yes.
that think
Think. Yes.
rather than thinking beings that feel.
Yeah.
So people feel very stressed or anxious. Where
Mhm.
does this come from, do you think?
Okay, I'm glad you said this. Okay, so I'm glad you brought it up. Let's establish the context of our civilization. Civilization as we know it is about 6,000 years old. So it's taken us 6,000 years to get to the state where you and I can step out of our house pretty much anywhere in the civilized world, in the developed world, and we'll be relatively sure that we're no threat. And not only that, but we also have the certainty, justified or not, that if we happen to run into any kind of problem, there are resources there for us to sort of take advantage of. Somebody will help us. There are laws, and there are sort of our official people in official capacity, like the police, etc., who are there to basically protect us physically. We have none of this when it comes to our mental and psychological health. We still think it's okay to yell at somebody. We still think it's okay to diminish somebody. We still think it's okay to simply empty ourselves because we are overloaded and unload on somebody else. And then we feel relieved and we sort of, blast at them with our anxiety and our panic, which are contagious and so on. Definitely, since the pandemic, we've become a lot more open about talking about stress. Everybody talks about the stress epidemic, etc. The thing is, we talk about the things we see, and we see more of it. We become more aware of it. I think this is the first necessary step towards the next stage of how we should be. I shouldn't, if I come here angry and stressed, I should feel as many inhibitions about passing on my anger and stress to you, no matter what context we're in, as I would feel if we met face to face, to allow it to become something physical. That's just like, breaking down so many norms in that situation. But we don't have the same inhibitions when it comes to yelling at somebody, or being slightly sarcastic, or being slightly rude. We don't have those yet, and we should be able to take care of each other mentally and psychologically, the same way that we strive these days to take care of each other physically. If you stumble and fall, somebody will rush to pick you up. They'll ask you, "You okay?" If you say, "I'm having a really bad day, I don't think I can cope," nobody knows what to say. People try to avoid you because they don't know what to do. Nobody's going to say, "Hey, why are you feeling this way?" Or, "It's okay to feel like that." We still have that kind of maturity, or maturing rather, to go through as a civilization. So we see it more now, and that's part of our awareness. It doesn't mean that there's more of it now than there was in the past, but in the past it was a hidden epidemic. We only saw it when it kind of boiled, things happened, some sort of crisis, and then we'd ask the questions. Why did he break down? Why did he behave like that? Why there were no warning signs? And if something happened in that context, what did we find in further analysis? That there were always warning signs. We just ignored them. We're starting to not ignore those signs now. We are more open about it. This is part of the process.
No, that's fantastic. Yeah, and that does make perfect sense. What are people stressing about or getting anxious about now? That is because we don't have the physical worry, we don't have
No.
like you say, the immediate physical danger.
Yeah.
I suppose presumably things like finances and.
Well, it's this. Our brain essentially trying to help us survive, tries to predict the next moment. We created all this that we see, all the edifice around us, which we call civilization, so that we can reduce uncertainty and increase predictability. And now we're getting again into a new century. It faces new problems. We talk about climate change and all this interconnectedness of countries. What one country does affects the other. Our systems of governance need to change. We don't know how to do it. Our very civilization needs a different social contract. Nobody knows what it's going to look like. We have a generation of young people growing up with no certainty about their future, no certainty that their future is going to be better than the people who came before them, which was not the case before. So all those things increase the uncertainty that we examine what we feel as we examine the future. And our brain really feels anxiety because of that. Every time we're anxious about something, it means that basically it's unpredictable. And something that's unpredictable makes us feel there's a threat, and the threat is unrealized. But what we feel internally is very real to us. So we still feel, clammy hands and rapid breathing and elevated temperature and all those things.
This has been fascinating, isn't it, Pete? I mean, it's not the conversation that I thought we were going to have today, but I love it.
I thought it would go like a way a way it has gone. Just after reading the book, I was like, right, because the book's got stuff in it, but it needs to speak to the reader and stuff. So it's not. I'm not going to say. I was going to say it's at a superficial level. I suppose like the depth you've gone into today, it is at a superficial level of that, but it's kind of explaining it all, so the reader can just be like, right, okay, this is what I need to do, and this is why I need to do it. And the why isn't what you say why you need to do it. It's find out why you as the reader want to do it, and then you're more likely to do it. It's not telling you what to do. It's asking you to find out why you want to do the thing, the exercises.
The book's a guide, and because we're all different, right? We all have different biochemical and neurochemical makeups, different history, different knowledge, different experiences, different traumas. So essentially we're all different. So it's presumptuous to say, okay, here's the formula you need to follow, and you're going to be okay. Well, no, it's not going to work. It's like a diet. We follow a diet. Sure, in the beginning, we all begin to lose some weight because it's different. And then what happens? We get tired. It seems to not be working. And then we stop and we think, okay, we lost some weight. We're going to go back to what we had, or simply continue, but not as strict. And we put weight on, okay, because we don't understand the mechanism behind our own metabolic system. So prescriptive things don't work. You have to essentially, and I say this in the book, right? We're responsible. The only expert on us is us. It's presumptuous for somebody to look at you and say, oh, here's what you have to do. I mean, how do you know? How do you know how I feel? They don't, is the answer. They just hope that you'll follow what they say and maybe it'll work for you. But in order for things to truly work, we have to work them out ourselves. And to do that, we have to stop being mean to ourselves, because we're very good at that, and start being kind. Okay. And I say in the book, essentially, if you had all day 3 people following you around, you have your own personal nutritionist, you have your own personal trainer, and you have your own personal psychologist. Well, you're going to be an amazing human being, right? Because anything you need, they'll solve it for you. And then you'll know what to do. Okay, we don't have that. We need to be that for ourselves. We need to be kind to ourselves. We need to be understanding. We need to be knowledgeable. We need to be forgiving. And we just need to also take a joy in who we are, regardless of how, whether are we perfect or not. Well, hardly any of us are perfect. But we need to take a joy in our condition.
And it's what's interesting is, like you say, a lot of people I see, and you see that obviously the health and the well-being and the fitness space online is huge, is thousands and millions of people on there. And so many people, if you asked a general member of the public, they would just say, well, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. Give me the diet to follow and I'll do it. Give me the exercise program to do and I'll do it. Because they don't really want to take that responsibility and that control themselves, and to really do the work that's going to take time to get there. They just want, like, give me a recipe, give me this, give me that, and I'll do it.
You're half right. I mean, I mean, we all want the easy thing, right? I mean, for a long time in my life, I just followed what they told me, right? I had to work hard. That came from me. But, more or less my diet was kind of preordained. My activity was preordained because I was following my teammates, and, we're sort of copying each other. We had trainers and coaches, and they told us what to do. And it's a kind of liberating thing that they guide you with their best intentions in mind. You just got to do this, and then you just put in the work. So it's not people don't want to put in the work, but they don't want to do the hard thing is not doing the work. They're willing to do that. If they go to somebody and say, tell me what to do, they're actually willing to do what they tell them. The hard thing is for themselves to face themselves. That's really hard. It's energetically hard, and it's uncomfortable. Understandably, we shy away from it. If I tell you really, who are you? Well, you're going to start peeling off the layers of your personality and the construct, which is your identity. And identity always has 2 elements, right? It has the ascribed identity, which the world has given you. And then it has the avowed identity, which you have built up through your own experiences and knowledge and sort of trajectory to the present. And those two sometimes don't mesh. Sometimes we fight with ourselves. The world tells us to be one thing and we accept it and we project that, and inside ourselves with something else. But understanding who we are brings those two closer together. So the fight inside ourselves, the energetic load of being us, becomes easier. If it's easier for us to be us, then it's easier then for us to ask ourselves, okay, where do I want to go from here? And why do I want to do that? But we have to start with lessening the load on being who we are. So that's why people go to somebody and say, tell me what to do, because they don't want to go inside themselves and actually go into the trouble of making those two halves fit. But we have to, if we really want to have a career or a life or a trajectory that actually is ours and it lasts and it makes us feel good. It's what I say, sustaining and sustainable. Makes us feel good, sustaining, but it's also sustainable. It's easy for us to do, easier.
It's funny because I think I read this in your book, but I've heard it again, like probably a few times over the last few weeks. But like I said earlier about like whatever people want and why they want it, once they've figured that out, you just do the same, like something similar, the similar process. But everyone ultimately wants the same thing anyway, don't they? They want to be happy, healthy, the family to be happy and healthy and live long and all of that sort of stuff. That's pretty much it, isn't it? But it looks different to everybody else. So
yes, that's the combination is going to be different. The direction, the general direction is the same, of course. We're all the same people at some level.
Yeah.
Oh, this is great. Well, yeah, go on, sorry, Pete.
I was going to say, so just get rid of Google and all these other search engines and just figure that out. There you go.
I was going to say, David, I think we'll have to get you back on again and speak, because this is.
I'd be delighted to. This is really enjoyable.
Yeah, really interesting and really, and there's so many ways we can go. And like we said, I think before we started recording, we just said, well, let's just keep it. It's always kind of flowing and conversational on here anyway. We never kind of know where we're going. We just take the conversation where it goes. But that's been, that's really interesting. And I know that most of the concepts we've obviously talked about are quite, I suppose, high level or, esoteric or something, a little bit more kind of bigger picture stuff today, which is great. And but it would be really good to maybe come back on and we can talk about how these kind of deeper, I suppose, systems and thought processes and feelings and how we actually maybe make that a little bit more tangible as well, which I think is.
Let's make them practical. Let's talk about the practicality of all that, because despite the complexity of the analysis that science has given us, which gives us a better understanding, and despite the admittedly difficult task of going inside ourselves, understanding how we work, and then trying to guide our own operating system, there are some remarkably simple, practical things we can do. We can use some things to help us understand who we are. We can use some very practical and remarkably easy things to sort of find a direction in our life. We can put into practice, again, incredibly easy things that help us relieve momentary stress that threatens to overwhelm us, so that we can think critically. And I think talking about that, especially in the modern context where the world around is changing really quickly, and it's throwing at us pressure after pressure after pressure every day, right? We wake up and we don't know quite what we're going to face, which is quite alarming. Having that in our skill set as people can only make us better.
No, that would be great. I mean, that's been great. Really, really good, David. Thank you so much. So if people want to follow you and find out more about you and keep an eye on what you're doing and things, what's the best platform or way for people to do that? Where would you like people to go?
You can find me at davidamerland.com. I put a lot of my thinking and insights up there. And then if you Google me, you'll find all my socials. Again, I share a lot of stuff which I come across because it excites me. And I think, the more we share, the more we learn. So, that's what I do. So you'll find.
And if people want to find the book and to get the book Built to Last,
you can order it from any bookshop. You'll find it online at Blackwell's and Amazon for sure. And I think it's also in all the ebook platforms as well as an ebook. So just look for it there.
Excellent. Brilliant. Yeah. And we will definitely talk again, about kind of practical application for some of these things, which are brilliant. You know, it's been great. Have you got anything, Pete, as we wrap up that you'd like to say, or?
No, I just think it was great. And my apologies to David, because he'd emailed and then emailed again and then emailed again and pushed it up the thing. And I eventually got back because I'd missed. I'm not very good at checking emails, put it that way. Like Messenger and stuff like that, it's all instant, isn't it? But emails I don't. But I'm glad I saw it, and then we've actually made this happen. It was great. And I said to James, I think before we. Yeah, I think it was just before we started recording, wasn't it? I said to James, I'd sent him a message and said, I think we're going to get on with this guy. So, hey.
No, that's brilliant. So thank you everyone. I mean, for listening, for watching. Please do like, share, subscribe, leave a review if you're watching or listening on a platform that allows you to do so, especially if you're on Apple Podcasts. And do go and follow David Amerland on Instagram. You know, check out the book Built to Last. We will definitely be speaking to David again in the future. That was really, really interesting. Next week, I think episode 244, we're on with Elise Ball, who is a former professional ballet dancer, professional dancer, now moved into kind of to strength training and things as well. It'll be interesting to talk to Elise actually with this conversation in our minds, Pete, as well. You know, like you said about forging that identity and finding who you are and the background that she's from will be really interesting. And I think the week after that, episode 245, we've got Terry Hollands on, who is former like Britain's Strongest Man, UK's Strongest Man, Europe's Strongest Man, World's Strongest Man finalist, I think 10 times in a row. We've got Terry Hollands on with us as well. So that's great. But this is, you know, this first episode live from Greece has been fantastic. And yeah, we'll definitely speak to David again. So thank you so much, David.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here.
Brilliant. Thank you, Pete. And we will see you all next week. Until then, bye-bye.